And good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's Zoom call. Tonight's leadership members Zoom on the topic of mental health and well-being in challenging times. My name's Daniel Kebede and I'm your national president for this year. And welcome everybody to this call. A couple of bits of housekeeping. There will be plenty of opportunity for question and answer during this session. So please do pop your questions in the Q&A and they will be picked up on. The chat is open, so please do, get to know each other in the chat and pass comment. Feel free to do so. We have the fantastic Sam Riddle here with us this evening, who's providing the British Sign Language interpretation. So welcome to Sam. It's been a really challenging time for our school leaders over the past 2 years. It's been a particularly challenging time for our children, our colleagues, but you as leaders of our schools and colleges, leaders within our communities, has been incredibly difficult. Had it not been for your successful leadership during the past 2 years, providing the absolute best for our young people, our colleagues and our wider communities, the situation would have been so much more difficult. So thank you for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. It's because of ethical leaders like yourself that our schools and colleges have been steered as best they can through a global pandemic with a government that has been exceptionally negligent. And it's been an incredibly stressful time for you personally. I still remember that poll that got released by the NAHT some point last year that highlighted that almost half of head teachers and school leaders plan to leave the profession prematurely, and that 70% had felt that job satisfaction had fallen in the past year. So this is an incredibly important topic that we are discussing this evening in regards to mental health and well-being in the wake of a global pandemic. We've got a number of speakers this evening. The first speaker will be Robin Bevan, your former NEU president and serving head teacher. Robin will do a talk on how he best take care of his school and also himself. After that, there will be opportunity to ask questions of Robin. We will then be hearing from Josie Whiteley, who is the vice chair of the National Leadership Council. We will be hearing from Amy Lassman, also a National Leadership Council member and head teacher, and also Gareth Lloyd, who's a Wales senior regional official. So big welcome to all of our speakers this evening. Just a quick reminder before we move on to Robin, please do pop your questions in the Q&A and we will ensure that they are best answered. So without further ado, your fantastic past president, Robin Bevan. So welcome, Robin.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Good to see familiar faces on the screen. Thank you for the invitation to speak tonight, and a warm welcome to everybody who's joined us from across the country. I can see from the chat we've got people from all sorts of different places across England and Wales. So I've been given up to about 10 minutes to speak, and I want to just do a kind of little bit of an overview of the different ways in which mental health and well-being and emotional health are addressed within the context of my own school community. I'm going to be honest, the little bit that's about how I look after myself has kind of fallen out of the end of my presentation, but that might be a really good thing to pick up as we go on. So I've got about 5 or 6 key points, each of which I'll illuminate with a few bits and pieces, and then of course more than happy to take questions. I think the first thing I want to say is, and I've actually just picked it up from just by the school entrance, so I'm going to put this up on the screen. I think you can just about see it, okay? So this says Leading Emotional Health and Wellbeing School 2021. Now, obviously, I'm pretty chuffed as a head teacher to get one of these, but it's where I went to get it from that is significant. It is the first thing that anybody walking in through the main entrance to the school sees. sits on the entrance table, and this is, if you like, my very first kind of point to make tonight. That if you want your school community to be one where emotional health, mental health and well-being are addressed, you've got to be open, you've got to be honest, you've got to have it up front, you've got to speak about it. You can't pretend that it's going to be addressed just in the background. It does need to be signaled, open, honest. So that's kind of number one. I'm now going to jump right to the other end of the scale. And this is just also, to be honest, that everything I'm going to say doesn't mean that we don't have issues and challenges within the context. Mine's a large secondary school, about 130 staff, including teachers and support staff in there. So it's a big school community. We're going to have issues. We're going to have issues with staff members. Across the last year or two, there have been members who've been through very significant challenges in their home lives. COVID has obviously been part of that, but also just the natural fluctuations of human life, ups and downs that we all experience and that some people experience even more. So if I'm starting by saying we should be signalling our interest and our well-being and our concern, at the other end, just a couple of things that we routinely do. We have open access for any staff member to confidential counselling. They can just ask for it through our HR. We don't need to know why. And they get access to that, and we pay for that, and it's just a very simple, easy service to access. And the other thing we did, it's a product, so I need to be careful about advertising it. But there's a company called Evermind who do a little app that you can have on your phone, and we got it free during the COVID pandemic. And the app includes a whole series of little mental health exercises, including things relating to sleep, including things relating to diet and fitness. They're very gently handled. And we subscribe to it. As I said, I've got it free to start with. We subscribe to it, put it out to all our staff members during the pandemic. And we're just really, really surprised when it came to having to first pay the bill on it. And making a decision whether to keep it or not. But we had about 25 colleagues who were regularly using it. We don't know exactly how or for what, but we know that they were tapping into something that was just supporting them in their mindfulness, in their sleep patterns or whatever. And our view was that a fairly modest cost on something like that was really smart. So that's from kind of dealing with it when it arises, and also signalling the commitment of the community. Now, just a few other bits and pieces. I think that when we're talking about emotional health and well-being, we actually have to start at some pretty basic stuff. And so the first of my key points is about creating a conducive workplace environment. And it sounds like the kind of stuff that it would be easy for school and college leaders to think is kind of somebody else's problem or is not important enough for them to be involved with. But I just made a little list about the things we're just really careful about. For more than 10 years now, we make sure that at break time and lunchtime, there is tea and coffee ready made for the staff. And it's so simple. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's easy to organise. A little bit of a staff rota helps out doing it. A voluntary staff rota, I should say, helps out doing it. But when you see a staff member, they've got a 20-minute break and they're rushing from their classroom into the staff room, they're trying to find their mug and they're trying to find their coffee and they're trying to rummage for a bit of scrappy milk in the fridge. It's just not an environment that's going to create an easiness, a comfort. We're very attentive as well to cleaning, and we make sure that colleagues' rooms, these are the common areas, but also the classrooms, are just cleaned as best as we can within the resource we have, that there are quiet workspaces, keeping an eye on making sure that their kit works, particularly laptops, screens, and anything like that. Because we all know the most stressful experiences on a day-to-day basis can actually arise because something basic isn't working. So it's being attentive to those kind of things. Food as well, free lunches whenever we have an inset day, and free lunch for any member of staff doing duty on that day. It's part of the kind of payment that we make for them taking on the additional duty. So just a quick list. They may not be things that work for you in your school or college environment, but a conducive workplace environment really does matter. Number two, this is a list of 5, it's not a long list. Number 2, the removal of uncertainty. And I'm going to put that in another way, or just providing predictability. Once again, if we think about our experiences of staff members, you're coming into work, you know what you're going to do, you know what you've got planned, you might even have thought, oh, and I've even got half an hour during the day when I can finish doing this or finish doing that or get that ready. And suddenly you're landed with, for example, an additional meeting or an additional task, or somebody says, oh, the reports are now due for this Friday, not the Friday afterwards. And it's those things that generate a huge amount of stress. So removal of uncertainty and predictability, a few things we do to work on that. We draw up our schedule of all meetings, including the topics for those meetings pretty much, and all requirements, so reports, parents' evenings, gradings, whatever they are. We do that in May for the next 12 months. We don't change it, or at least if we are going to change it, that has to be with really careful negotiation with the staff. That's wrapped up very nicely with making sure that directed time is in a good order. That also matters. It really does matter, particularly for our part-time staff as well, because they get a pro rata allocation. And we also make sure that all the things we're asking of our staff are evenly distributed through the year. And not just that the deadlines are evenly distributed, but the work required to achieve them is. Just have to be a little bit careful around that. I can answer questions for one. We go out of our way to make sure that our newer teachers, typically younger, but really what I mean is newer teachers, early career teachers, have the best rooms in the school to teach in, and that they don't have to move. I mean, it's so much the other way around to some schools, where if you serve for 20 years, it's your room and you're never moving. No, tough luck, mate. If you've been here 20 years, then you've got the experience and the confidence and probably the professional adaptability to be the person who moves. A couple of other gems in there in terms of predictability. This changed during COVID, so this is new for us. But during COVID, teachers were taking all their free time, PPAs, free periods off-site. And we just thought, why on earth have we not permitted this before? What is it that is so important about people being on the site to do a job? They've got a job to do, let them do the job. So PPA can be taken and free periods can be taken off-site. We have a little simple notification system just in case anybody does need to come in for cover, but cover is allocated very, very rarely in line with the kind of usual agreements. But that's about predictability. Once again, not everything there will chime with you, but the general message will. Leads into number 3, which is just making sure that our expectations are reasonable and sustainable. And what I've actually written down here is something that, preparing for today, I don't think I'd quite realized before. We do quite a bit of work within our senior team about having high levels of trust. We use Stephen Covey's work on that. We find that really helpful. You might want to look it up. And I'd not really registered before, but in low trust environments where people feel they're being checked up on all the time, or they're not given delegated authority to get on with things, in low trust environments, you have perpetual anxiety. And if we're talking about emotional well-being, we're talking about emotional health, we need to be in a position where there isn't that perpetual anxiety. So it's reasonable demands around planning and marking and reports, just a simple thing. We pay somebody a very small sum of money to do proofreading on all our reports. And it means teachers can draft them. They do their best, but they don't get everything right. But it then just goes to a proofreader, it just tidies it up and just makes it all consistent. And it's a simple little bit of extra cost and the proofreader will tell me as head teacher if there's a colleague who's not submitted reports of a kind of reasonable quality, and we just follow that up gently. But the principal purpose is just to take away from teachers an unnecessary stress. And the other thing we're really careful about in our reasonable expectations is that as far as possible, colleagues are only working to one line manager for the job they're doing. And I think in teaching so often, you've got your departmental leader who might be giving you something. You've got the pastoral leader is giving you something. And then 5 other people are throwing things into your inbox that you're supposed to be doing, all of which are worthwhile school initiatives and developments, but try as far as we can to mediate it through one person. 2 more things to finish. this is a bold one. Don't know how this is going to go down. The language we use is we talk about servant leadership from our senior leaders. And it's not necessarily the language that everybody is comfortable with, but it's around having a mindset where your job as a leader is to create the circumstances where other people thrive. And so that's about being visible. It's about being out and about to help. But I'm going to give you a simple one. Once again, I don't know how this will go down, but we're really careful to make sure that if a teacher is dealing with a pupil who's misbehaved, dealing with that pupil does not generate more work for them. So minor infringements, I'm just going to give you this little one, okay? If a pupil does something kind of pretty minor, not big deal, but the teacher thinks that there ought to be some kind of response here, then we have this thing that we call, forgotten its name. Community service, that's the name we give to it, community service, okay? And they have to turn up to meet with some of our sixth formers, so it's run by sixth formers. They meet them for the last 10 minutes of the lunchtime, and all they do is just a little bit of tidying up in the dining hall or outside. So it's a simple response. But here's the other bit of it. The pupil is given the choice about which day they turn up. Because otherwise our experience is that the teacher would say, you've got to do community service. And then they get into an argument with the kid because the kid will say, oh, but I've got football practice at lunchtime. Or, but I've got to go and see Miss X because I was also in trouble in her lesson. So we've just gone for this really simple system where the pupil chooses which day, because it is a minor infringement. They've just got to turn up sometime in the next fortnight to do it. So it's an example which you might not like, but it's about making sure that the teacher doesn't get more work for dealing with a small disciplinary item. Final item from me in this kind of list is looking to make sure that decisions in school are undertaken in an open and consultative way. So about once every half term, I meet with union reps, meet with staff governors. The door's open anyway, but these are more formal meetings. All the staff know they're going to happen, so any issue can be brought in through that channel if it needs to be. And one of the things that is associated with that is when we do make decisions that might be a bit difficult for the staff, they might not agree with them, we always give them the reason. Because if you give them the reason, they'll understand it. It's not an imposition, it's something that kind of makes sense. So wrap all that together and you begin to create the kind of environment in which you end up with, as I say, the award we've got. I'm chuffed about it, leading emotional health and well-being, but also signalling it really, really strongly. So that's my little flavour, Daniel, and I hope it's stimulated some thoughts, some questions, and we'll chime, I'm sure, with what other people are going to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin, for that indeed. We don't have any questions as of yet, but feel free to pop those in the Q&A. Robin, I really did enjoy what you had to say. Your school sounds like a lovely school to work in, to be honest. Muhammad Ali, he used to say that it's not the mountain you've got to climb, it's the pebble in the shoe that grinds you down. And it sounds like you've got all those pebbles in order, and when they do arise, you know, teachers and school staff know what to expect, when to expect it, and that really minimizes a lot of the anxiety that does exist in our profession, to be honest. In many schools, it's often the things that you don't expect that cause the most stress. We've got a question here, and I will okay, so Robin, how does your ethos work in school when you've got reports from CAMS and safeguarding reports due at short notice? And that's a question from Colette. Do you have any sort of strategies in place for those unexpected things, really?
Yeah, I mean, there are things you can't avoid, aren't there? I mean, in the life of a school. So you can have pupil misbehavior, you can have safeguarding issues, you can have issues in relation to SEND that can arise during the course of a day. I think there's two things to say. One is that you want to be sure that the staff members who need to respond to those things do have the capacity to do so. And that does mean that you don't want to be in a position where you've crammed everybody so full of activity, so full of earnest activity, that they don't actually have that little bit of slack here and there. So that's difficult, but that does mean that you should be comfortable with the idea that not everybody is working flat out 8 in the morning to 8 at night every day. And in fact, the opposite, you should be in a position where you can kind of just ease back a little bit in headship, senior leadership, at the SENCO, at those who deal with safeguarding DSLs and so on. The second is working really kind of carefully with the senior team in particular, and different schools, colleges configured in different ways, but working with the senior team to look far enough ahead to know that the events that we've got planned, so we have half of the school has an assembly on a Tuesday, half the school has a big assembly on a Thursday. I'm talking about normal times. There are changes to do with COVID, but in normal times, half the school on Tuesday, half on Thursday. And something like that, it matters that it's really good. It matters that it's right. So what we try to do is make sure the materials are prepared several days in advance. This is an odd response to the question, but it's actually by making sure that you are prepared a few days in advance means that if something does bite suddenly, you can stop the other bits that you're doing. You can buy yourself some time. If you're always working up to deadline, you won't have that capacity. So that's the kind of response. And obviously some days, it's tough. You do have to stay late, but that's when the next day you make sure everybody's all right and you just nod them a wink and say, go home at 3:30 and make sure you're looking after yourself.
Fantastic, Robin. It sounds like there's a bit of an ethos to make sure that you and members of staff and the SLT always have just a little bit left in the reserve tank, at least, to deal with those unexpected events, which sounds like a very good strategy. We have another. Oh no, that's your question. Colette, many thanks to you, Robin, from Colette, for answering her question. Okay, so we shall go over to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Josie Whiteley, the Vice Chair of the National Leadership Council. So welcome, Josie.
Thank you, Daniel. It's lovely to be here, and thank you, Robin, for your contribution. Excellent, as always. I won't take very long at all. I just wanted the opportunity to talk this evening to draw attention to the resources that the NEU has available on its website to help and support leaders. And Taj has been ahead of the game, and she's been putting lots of fantastic links in the chat. So please, everybody, make sure. I never quite trust that if this is recorded that the chat thing sort of stays. I always cut and paste links that I want and save them into a Word document quickly. So please, there's lots of great links going up there now. And I just wanted to highlight this because there's a lot of new things going onto the website. Steve Cooper and his colleagues have been working hard on creating useful advice sheets around issues that we know concern and cause stress to managers and leaders. So things like health and safety issues, which may or may not be COVID related, things like managing restructures, things like how you deal with complaints against yourself, for example, or somebody else on SLT. Some great short and straight to the point advice sheets available on there. Our ethical leadership document. It's been around for a little while now, but some people still don't know about it. So the link again is in the chat. Please do download that and look at it. It's only, I think, 4 pages long, lots of useful information in there. And a key way that it can be used, if you are, for example, a deputy head in a school where your head teacher isn't what you would perhaps consider to be a good and ethical leader, it's a great document to sit down and have a chat to them around that document. It's not going to take too long. It's not a book. It's 4 pages long. And it basically says, this is what the NEU believes is strong and ethical leadership. And actually it sets out expectations for our NEU leadership members. And you can point that out to a colleague who, even if they're senior to you, isn't going to have any argument to that, because it's all about decency, fairness, and compassion. I can't stress enough the value of creating a circle of support around you. One of the things, I was talking to a colleague recently, and they said that they were finally learning how to manage up. So again, if you're a deputy head and you've got a head or a chair of governors that you're having difficulty with, having the confidence to say no, having the confidence to know when you're being taken advantage of or when you're being asked to do something that you know to be wrong, having the confidence to stand up and to challenge that, whoever it is that's above you that you're challenging. I just wanted to remind you that the NEU is there as your support. They've got your back. So you involve your local district and then you will get some appropriate advice and guidance to support you should you need that, because leadership can be a really lonely place, especially when you're challenging a status quo. And if it's a status quo in a toxic environment, one thing I would say to you as well is think about your own health and well-being as your top priority, and don't put up with it. Don't stay in a toxic environment because you're panicking about the mortgage, for example. Especially now, there are vacancies because people are leaving the profession. So there are other jobs that you could go to, and far better to be physically and mentally fitter and healthier and not going down the route of things like nervous breakdowns. So take control of your own destiny if you're working in a difficult environment. And remember, the NEU is there to support you. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Yes, Guild. Guild, I'm not sure, Taj, if we can have a Guild link in the chat, but Guild is something else that is offered to NEU leadership members, and we really want to develop that as a place for support for each other. It can be a place to chat, it can be a place to share advice. Robin's tips, for example, Guild would have been perfect for a bullet point list just to be slotted in there and shared amongst leaders who are accessing Guild. There aren't that many people utilising that at the moment, and that's a real shame because it's a great tool. So I would encourage you, please, to do that. Yes, it's coming up in the chat now telling you how you can do that. Just two more things. I was looking at some statistics about mental health. Pre-pandemic, it said, and this is from Mental Health First Aid England, that 1 in 4 people experienced mental health issues each year. That was before COVID hit. The data since COVID hit from a government website suggests that there was an increase from 2019 to April 2020 of 9% of people reporting a clinically significant level of psychological distress. So the impact of COVID, which we know has hit teachers and leaders and pupils and parents hard, it has hit society in general, and 9% is a massive figure of the population of the UK. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that issues with mental health are not getting better, they're not going down, they're increasing in the current workload with the problems that we're facing. So please utilise the NEU. Remember to go to its website and to look for resources that can help and support you. And please do join Guild so we can all work together to informally help and support each other. Thank you, Daniel. That's just my contribution.
Thank you very much indeed, Josie. So we shall move on to our next two speakers, and then we will open up again to Q&A. So please keep your questions coming in the Q&A function in the bottom panel. But our next speaker is a head teacher and National Leadership Council member, Amy Lastman. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much. Just as I turned that off mute, somebody started yet another fireworks party. So it's not shooting. It might be Birmingham, but it's not shooting, you can hear. Those are just fireworks. I'm going to say, first of all, it might be a little bit garbled because I haven't really had time to plan it properly, but I have got some ideas. And fortunately, Robin and Josie have already covered most of what I wanted to say. But I came home from work, I rushed home to get home to do this, and I turned my laptop on, and it just made me laugh that my laptop was really struggling to get onto this because I had so many tabs open. The clock is stuck on 16:56 on the 31st of October. And I was like, that basically sums up what my life is like at the moment. I've got too many tabs open and I'm stuck in the past somewhere and I'm not keeping up with things. So that just made me laugh. I thought I'd share that because that's a good. I also was planning to organise what I was going to say this morning and then had to get involved with some urgent mediating between two members of staff who because, to be honest, mental health difficulties and stress have had a big falling out. And so I was dealing with that this morning, which just keeps on coming up. So what I wanted to talk about briefly is, I'm pretty new to this game, definitely new to headship. I've been a senior leader for about 12 years, but, talking about stress and workload and bad timing, I was the deputy head at my current school when we went into lockdown. The head had to go into shielding immediately. So we didn't see her again. She went, that was it. Then I became interim head just over a year ago, November the 1st last year. Then we went through a couple of recruitment cycles where for some reason nobody was applying for headships. So we had to keep postponing until I was eventually interviewed when they managed to pull together enough people for what they thought would be an appropriate number of people in February. So taking it on at this time has been a slightly foolish decision, but one that I am enjoying. Throwing into the mix, obviously we're outstanding in 2008 money. So we have got pending Ofsted. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock, you'll hear me scream if we've got away with it for another week. So, things are really, really hard, but I do still manage to find the enjoyment in it. And that is down to the staff that we have and the families that we have. So I thought I just wanted to talk about two things that have been helpful to me over this period that I think others might need to think about. It's broken down into two areas. One is leadership of others. And then my way of explaining it to myself, number two, is management of self. And I genuinely mean just for myself. So I'm leading others, but I'm managing myself. So we did lots of great things through lockdown, lots of things that Robin and Josie have already talked about. Another app that I'd like to advertise, but not on commission, but Headspace is a really good app, which is free for anybody who can prove their work in education. So I sent that out to teachers, to all staff, in fact. And like Robin was saying with the app you use, loads of people have been using it. It's completely free. I've had dinner ladies come and tell me they've been doing daily meditations from it, but teachers who've said they use it to go to sleep every night. It really is fantastic. And they're adding more and more to it. They've even got a channel on Netflix now, but there's movement things, there's little exercises, there's short yoga sessions, there's meditations, there's things if you wake up in the middle of the night with a racing mind, visualizations. It's a brilliant app and I do recommend it. We also did a lot of work through lockdown on trying to keep people engaged and feeling part of a community. So I wrote a weekly newsletter to staff that other people contributed to. We had, yoga poses in there. We had cooking competitions. We had our own version of Bake Off. We use employee assist as well. All of these things that we had in place normally, but they really came to the fore through lockdown, and they have helped people to get through this whole awful situation that we've been through. So there's been a lot of leadership of others and maintaining, my own calmness. And people say, how do you manage? Somebody said to me yesterday, one of my TLR holders, I wouldn't do your job for all the money in the world. And I said, well, you certainly wouldn't do it for what I actually get then. So, people, it's that constant having to show a positive side to things. And I remember at one point, in that, possibly that summer term, when we had our vulnerable children in, somebody overheard me in the corridor saying to someone else, it's just all falling apart. And they came to see me and they said, what's happened? Because if you feel like that, then something really bad has happened. And I had to talk my way out of it and say, oh no, I was talking about something else. It's fine. Everything's fine. We're all good. But I think in the absolute absence and vacuum of any decent moral, ethical leadership from the Prime Minister and the government, we have had to really hold together huge groups of people and communities, and that has a massive impact. So then my second point that I wanted to talk about is this management of self and how I've really tried to look after myself. And I think often as leaders, we don't think about ourselves enough, and we don't put ourselves ahead. And you can hear all of these things that people say about you can't pour from an empty cup, or whatever the expression is. but it's really difficult to do it. And there are two things that I've found that have really helped me. And I appreciate that these are things that have helped me, and I'm a particular type of person. The first thing that's really helped me is I've signed myself up twice to 2 free supervision groups. One through the DFE. This is probably the only time I'll be grateful to them for anything or praise them for anything. But they did a pilot scheme, and we had some Zoom meetings over the summer. A random group of head teachers, we all got put together. We had 4 or 5 sessions that were led by a professional coach. And it was really, really helpful just to talk to other people in the same situation. I think, Josie, you already said it, have that group of support. Now, I've got that with local people, but this group was just random people I'd never met before. And that was even more powerful. Someone I'd never met was going through the same things and was able to offer support and advice. So I really recommend any kind of supervision for yourself. My notes are a real mess here, but I've just remembered something I really forgot to say, which is very similar to what Robin was saying. I'm driving everybody mad at school because every time they come to me with an idea and say, can we do this? Can we do that? I say, yeah, have you done the workload impact assessment? And they say, oh, no. And I said, well, when you've done that, come back and tell me, because we've got so many brilliant ideas and there's so much that we need to do, but we can't do everything. And it has to have an impact, but we need to check what impact it's going to have on our staff. So I'm driving people mad with that, but it has got to the point where they're coming and starting to talk and then say, oh no, actually I'll come back because I need to go and do a workload impact assessment. The second thing that I have found really helpful to me is I'm also a member of the NEHT, and I went to their conference, and Paul Whiteman said in that conference, in his speech, he said to us, don't use your expertise to try and make a bad idea work. And that has really stuck with me. And I've just thought, do you know what? I'm going to stop bending over backwards to try and make these things work that I think are wrong. And I think and that's why I joined this NEU leadership group. I've been in the NEU since I qualified, because for me, the thing that keeps me sane through this and keeps me able to keep going is that I'm ready to stand up and say no to these things and to be active and to fight against them. So while I'm sitting and work, and I've got a budget monitoring meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to have to be finding money for tissues and all of those things and really struggling to make it work. I'm a realist. I've got to make it work. But I'll follow that meeting up by emailing my MP and by speaking to my unions, both of them, and saying we shouldn't be in this position and we shouldn't be allowing it to go through. We're in a situation at the moment, I know this isn't what I've been asked to speak about, but we're in a situation at the moment where our Prime Minister can walk through a hospital without wearing a mask and nobody is holding him to account. And yet I'm held to account every day for lots of things I should be held to account for, but it's just, we've got to use our power and our strength and our unity to fight this. So I get frustrated when I go to meetings and there's head teachers at consortium and they're saying, oh, how are you managing this tutoring funding? I say, well, I'm trying to do this, that and the other, but I'm also emailing my MP and saying this is ridiculous. And I think that's what helped me to stay able to do my job, because I want to serve my community and I want to support my staff and I want to do the servant leadership. And I really want our staff and our families to get the very best. And we're in a really deprived area and it's not happening, but I'm refusing to make these bad plans work. I'm doing the best that I can, but at the same time, I'm making sure that everybody knows that it's not right. And I think that's the thing that as leadership members of the NEU, we need to be really on board with. We have a lot of power. The NEHC has a lot of power, but they have that power because they're leaders, and we have a voice that needs to be loud, and we need to work together and put those messages across. So, we're really struggling at the moment, but I can't struggle and not tell people. So my message really is to look after yourselves and to look after your own integrity through this, and to get that supervision, get that feeling of strength, join your union groups, go to meetings, speak to people, and realise that we're not paid to make bad ideas work. We're paid to serve our communities. And that anger is what gets me through. So I realise that's not really what I was meant to talk about, but that's what has come to me.
Well, that was a superb message to give, I think, Amy, particularly highlighting the structural causes that drive poor mental health and stress, Ofsted, the accountability regime, and funding, of course. And I also think child poverty is in there as well, because it is painful going into school and witnessing the increasing levels of deprivation. But I really do love your message of do your best, but keep on talking. Basically, keep on saying and speaking the truth about what's going on in education. So thank you very much for that contribution. Next speaker is Gareth Lloyd. So welcome, Gareth. Gareth is the Wales Senior Regional Official. So welcome, Gareth.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to comment on some of the things that Amy said. I just want to thank you very much, because it leads fantastically into what I was about to say. One thing when you said about the workload impact assessment, I do want to send a message out, I'm sure, on behalf of all my colleagues, but at this moment, definitely from the Wales office and from our reps, to say the relationship between our reps and the head teachers has been phenomenal during this crisis. It's unbelievable. And I've learned an awful lot because we did spread a message sometimes about the most scary thing sometimes can be knock the head's door in any job. But actually, a lot of our heads have told us that can be quite scary on the other side of the door when people are going in and making demands. So based on meetings we've had with our forum, and it's great to see one of our forum members on this call as well, we've changed a lot of the ways we do things in Wales. For instance, if we send things to our reps, we make sure that our leaders get it first. So we ask them to have that conversation. So when the door is knocked, they're prepared for it and they're going to have that conversation beforehand. For some of the bespoke training that we're planning to do in Wales, we're getting our leaders to talk to our reps about what type of things we should be putting in there, that they're working together. There's a couple of when you said about going to meetings, I totally agree. As a former NEU, secretary of previous union, I totally agree with you. Having the leaders in those meetings with me when I was in Merthyr Tydfil was fantastic, because the advice they give me as a caseworker was beyond belief, better than anything I received elsewhere. So coming along to those meetings, a couple of tips I've suggested maybe for secretaries is, one, we've had a bit of a separate meeting as well, to get the leaders a chance to voice their concerns, because sometimes in a wider meeting that they may not want to do that with all the members present, so that can work really well. But their input is definitely needed in the branch and district, so that message needs to get out there. We are sending up again, I love the line that came from our leadership forum, which was, we're not here to tell you what leaders want, we're here to find out what the leaders want and then tell you. So things like surveys going out, if you've got a small group meeting, yeah, that's great, but you need to know what our members want on the ground as well. And that's something that's come from our equality forums as well. They don't want to be the voice piece, they want to know what our members want. So that's a united message across everything. So we're sending, we have sent a training questionnaire out to all our members and our reps, but we're sending one out in the next couple of weeks based on what the forum want in terms of leadership training, in terms of support with mental health, in terms of multiple other things as well. Whatever they want, we can look at what we can put on alongside them. So it's not something that's done to them. The support comes from you because you're the experts in the field. One of the authorities, and I can't name because I don't think the survey's gone out yet, is working with the NHT. All our leadership members have been filling in. And this is a comment that was in the chat actually, and so that Anna's put, and I totally agree. The trust above. So they're actually challenging the local authority doing their own mental health survey, and the joint union approach is going to be, this is how they feel trusted from above. And that's something that we've not really done across other authorities. So that survey will be something that, if it works, we can obviously share in England and the rest of Wales as well. But that was member-led. That didn't come from the office. That came from our heads on the ground, which is always the best, which is what you want in a trade union. So I'm very proud of that one. They showed it to me just before it's due to go out, which is the best thing of all. So congratulations to them. Just in terms of our branch secretaries, they do want to work with our leaders, as we pointed out earlier on, and it's something we've got to do more of. When I met with the forum members, myself and Glassney, unfortunately couldn't be on this call today, prior engagement, sorry, a new engagement came up this evening, she had to attend. We apologised to our forum members at the beginning and said we need to do far more for leaders in the office, and we do, and we are trying to do more, but we can only do that with your input. Rather, it's what I said back at the beginning, we don't want to do things for you, it's more what do you need, what can we help with, you're the experts. We need to do an awful lot more of that, and hopefully that's something we can do in the future. In terms of the value education, we're going to give a talk to our reps on Monday, and the first thing we're going to say is this has been sent to the leaders, meet with your leaders, have a chat with them first, and then before you can go meet with your members. This is not something that's going to create conflict between our leaders and our members. This is something we want to work together on, and it's back to what Amy said earlier on, workload impact assessments are not something that's to torture leaders. It's far from it. It's something that they themselves need to do. That if you're taking on a new initiative, something's going to have to give. So it was really, really appreciate what was just said. There is a couple of other things, just very quickly. I know it's not quite on the remit, but we've had a few meetings with Welsh Government today. And I do want to point out that a lot of the impact we had on there came from our leadership forum. For instance, changing the school day, we've said we're not discussing that. A document actually went out to the local authorities, which heads are going to receive, which we never saw. So we've gone back and jointly with the NHC and ASCIL and NSUWT, we've asked for it to be withdrawn so we can actually share it with our leaders so we can consult on it before it goes out to the employer. So that's again come from our forum that, you know, how many times do you have something appearing on, you know, on your desk? Well, that hadn't been consulted with us. In terms of tertiary education, we've asked for that to be put back because that could have impact on sixth forms. We actually say we want to speak to our leaders again rather than rushing it through. So all of that stuff has come from the impact from our leaders to stop you having something appearing on your desk on Monday morning. So hopefully that's something we can continue in the future. If there are any issues or anything I've said, as well as taking questions, I'll post the company.wales email in the chat, and anything you want us to follow up on or you're interested in, whatever nation you're in, I'm happy for you to email me and I'll post that. And that closes what I'm going to say, Daniel, but I'll take any questions that anyone's got.
Thank you very much, Gareth, for that contribution. We do have a number of questions actually, and it would be great if the panel could provide some answers to them. Do chip in and provide your thoughts. I've got a question here. It says, I know some leaders feel they have to be the first on the premises and the last to leave. What's your view on this kind of behaviour? So maybe Robin.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to respond with a very brief story. A couple of years ago, I went up to London after work to a workshop seminar at the Institute of Education. It was on leadership experiences, comparative leadership experiences in different countries. So it was all very, very kind of serious stuff. And because I was in London, I'd made sure that I was also that evening going to go on to a gig. It was Ska Band were playing down near Trafalgar Square. And it was just really interesting. During the course of the workshop at the Institute of Education, somebody there actually said to me, they said, I bet you told your staff you were going to the Institute for the workshop, didn't you? You didn't tell them about the gig, did you? And it just made me feel, honestly, I was caught out there. I was caught out. And it was a really good reminder, actually, of the fact that as leaders, we need to signal that we are leading normal lives, that it's perfectly all right. Now, in terms of first in, first out, I mean, this building opens up at 4 a.m. There's no way I'm going to be here then because we have early morning cleaning and we have some activities before school or whatever. So it's not even possible in the context of a kind of big community secondary school. But I think it really matters. I cycle to and from school, which is actually partly to do with my mental well-being. I find that for me works as a preparation to come in, as a decompression on the way home. Not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's really important actually that the staff and pupils see me sometimes cycling in at 9:30 in the morning. School has started, school is operating, but they see me coming in at that time, and they will know that that's actually because I may have been to a meeting possibly, but it may just be that I was working late the night before. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do to show people. The only risk here on this question is how people respond if they see you going home early and they know you haven't addressed or responded to some of their issues. And that can create a kind of a little bit of a distorted pressure. So one of the things that I think is important for leaders is if an issue is raised by a member of staff or there's something that you need to do for somebody else, just to acknowledge it, be clear that they know when it's going to be done, and then honour that so that you can then reasonably take a balanced life yourself. Just a reflection. Daniel, I think Amy wants to come in.
Thank you very much, Robin. Over to you, Amy.
And just very similar, really, to Robin. I mean, I just want to say I'm rarely the first one in. I'm quite often the last one out with the caretaker. But I spoke to staff in a meeting last week and had to say to them, when they're reporting their absences and things, they've all got my mobile phone number. We're a small staff, we're 50 altogether. There's probably 25 teachers. We've all known each other a long time. Of course, they've got my mobile number. But I said to them, I said, I know you're trying to help, but please don't WhatsApp me at 6:10 in the morning to tell me that you're not coming to work. Because I said, nobody here starts work till 8 o'clock. The office opens at 8 o'clock. You can leave a voicemail. Somebody comes into the office at 8 o'clock and will listen to your voicemail, and then we will action it. And I said, I protect your well-being by not emailing you and not calling you in the evenings. Could you please look after my personal life and private life as well, and not send me that message, or send me that message at 11 o'clock at night and literally wake me up. I said, I also have a work-life balance and a private life that needs to be protected. And I said, in the same way as I protect yours, you need to help me. And I think just making it really clear to them that we are also humans and have our own family lives. And I said, you've got my number. If it's an emergency, of course, call me. But if you're not coming into work, that's not an emergency. We'll just phone a supply agency at 8 o'clock and somebody comes. It's not. And, I said, I know it can be easier for you and you might feel like it's more helpful to the school, but I said, it really isn't. Because then I have to remember it until I get to school. And there have been times where I've got to school and forgotten that somebody told me at 5:30 because I wasn't really awake. So we've talked about the process there. And I said, I'm always available on email. I'll always pick up emails, but I choose when to look at my emails. If you send me a WhatsApp message, you are, I could be out with friends. And I think sometimes it's just important for them to know that we have our lives as well. And we are there to support them, and they can always call in an emergency, but just to be aware that we've all got our own things going on and that work isn't everything. We're not 24/7, we're not slaves. So I've said to them that they can contact me and each other between 8 and 5 on weekdays, but they're not to message me other than email or other members of staff outside of those hours, to protect each other's well-being. Because we've all been there where there's, or if I try to go in early to get something done and people just come in a stream of people one after the other, and I think, well, this doesn't help me at all. So I think they're, like Robin's saying, it's just making people realise that it goes both ways, and we've all got to look after each other. But that's a good example, I think. If you message me at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to reply, nor should anyone else. We're all a bit victim, I think, to the not having any actual directed hours. So people tend to think they can call whenever. But I think it's good to set an example and say no. Self-preservation.
Absolutely, Amy. Thank you very much. And Josie.
Yes, thank you. Following on perfectly from what Amy's just said about leading by example, I think one of the key things that a strong leader does in any environment is they take ownership of their setting, and they decide what the expectations are of themselves and of others. So to me, a key thing you should do as a leader is you decide what is acceptable to you. in your role, in calls on your time and so on, and behaviours, and then you ensure that there are clear expectations passed on to your staff. And to me, that's how it works. Yes, there may be pressures from higher up, whether it's governors or academy chief or whatever, but you decide that operational level, what happens in your school or your college every day, and how you work. So there is leading by example, but it may be that, as Robin said, you're not necessarily there first thing in the morning and last thing at night. You don't need to be. You have to have your respect for your colleagues to know that they can do the job perfectly well when you're not there. And that is actually the sign of a great leader. The fact that a leader might have to be there all the time is, to me, a sign of weakness. So I think it's about, yes, leading by example, but you taking ownership of what you decide that example should be and what your expectations are in your environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. So I think we've probably got time for one more question. Please keep your answers pacey. There's a really good question here from Siobhan Collingwood, and it goes as follows: how can we build confidence amongst leadership to respond to the feeling that Amy describes, that is shared by many, that we don't have to make ridiculous policy work? Most recently, for example, being baseline. So what can we do to build confidence amongst leadership members? Any thoughts from the panel? Go on then, Gareth.
Yeah, I think we'd answer this question as we would with any member. And again, one of my local authorities is collectivising it, is getting a group of heads together. So it's a message that we can't get away from. If you've got a number of schools in an area, that fear of competition or saying something different, that's come from our heads. So if it's a collective view and you're getting the view of we're standing together as a group of heads and we're saying this, with joint union comment, it's a lot easier for them to go back to school and say, we're not going to do this. And that's where the trade union comes in to help them collectivise that issue and say, take it as far as we can as a group. So from my point of view, it is, don't do it alone, do it together. And if we can help with that, we will.
Thank you, Gareth. And Robin.
Yeah, it's a challenging one sometimes for leaders. I think for me that the first response to Siobhan's question is to say that we're really careful. I'm now talking about my own school. In the context of my own school, we're really careful about the reasons that we use to legitimise things. And that it doesn't protect necessarily us as leaders, but it certainly helps to protect the staff. And I'll give you a classic example. The big example in England schools is the number of things that are done because Ofsted says. And Ofsted is not on our list of approved reasons to do anything. We only have 4. I'll tell you what they are. We recommend something if it is more efficient, if it is more effective, if it's morally right. So there might be some ethical. That sticks with the E's if you want. Efficient, effective, and ethical. And the 4th is if it's fun. And we don't get enough of that actually sometimes within our schools. And I think that at one level that helps within the school community to decide what you're going to legitimise and what you're not. Then there's the second issue, and I'm absolutely with Gareth here, which is when you get on to institutional refusal, non-compliance ultimately. And that's when you've got to make sure you're doing it collectively. I'll give you one example. This is being recorded, might get in trouble, here we go. There was a particular point in the COVID pandemic when we were all told that our schools, our secondary schools, were due to open at a particular time or reopen at a particular time. And I got together with fellow secondary head teachers in the Southend area and we said, no, we're not. And we wrote to all our parents and said, no, we're not. Well, the letter actually said what we were going to do, which was very sensible. It was a staggered return with work provided at home. We were still going to do all the things that we got in trouble for it with the Regional Schools Commissioner. But there was nothing the Regional Schools Commissioner could do because it was lots of us. And we said, yeah, well, we're going to get there. We're doing it. So there is that piece. And then the third piece is the campaigning piece. And like Amy, if something's not right, then make noise and just keep making noise. And we're winning some of those arguments. The Ofsted argument, I think in particular, is, and the arguments around assessment beginning to grow in public consciousness.
Thank you very much, Robin. Amy? And then
I think the key to it, sorry, like Robin was just saying, it is, and Gareth, is to collectivise it, to talk to your staff group. You know, we've got 100% teaching staff in the NEU now. We've got all of our support staff in Unison and GMB. But when we had that issue in January about the section, whatever the number was, forgotten now, but section whatever it was, and we didn't go back to school.
Before.
That's it. I just emailed all of the staff and said, feel free to send me this letter. Here's a draft. Here's one from Unison, here's one from GMB, here's one from the NEU. Send it to me. Give me the strength and the power to help you. And I said, I can do it on my own, but it'll work a lot better if I say I've got 57 letters. And I think getting your staff to know your morals and your ethics and the things that you really believe in, and saying, we're going to do this because we have to. And if we don't do this, we'll get in a lot of trouble and we'll be academised, and that's even worse. We're going to do this. We're going to play along, but we're going to do it at the least harm. And we're going to do it saying that we don't want to do it. So we're going to make sure that our community get what they need. We make sure that our school is protected, and we make sure that we all work together, and we encourage everybody to be unionised and to work on these issues, because united as education staff, we can beat this government. There's a lot of us, and we have a lot of power, and we can be very strong. And also we have parents. So I emailed the parents and told them that we wouldn't be open because it wasn't safe, and that most of them agreed. So I think it's about, you know, mobilising. So it's agitating and activating, and trying to find a way that we can sleep at night when we do have to do these things. And that's, like I was saying, that's how I find the balance. And yet standing up. So coming to meetings like this, taking the time, and making sure that our whole staff body are as unionised as possible, and that they realise that everything is political, particularly education, and that they came into this for a reason, and they need to fight to protect it. So that's what I'd say: unity, solidarity.
Unity and solidarity indeed. Well, thank you very much for your questions and your contributions. A huge thank you to Robin, to Josie, to Amy, and to Gareth. That is pretty much all we've got time for this evening. A really important discussion about well-being and mental health in these challenging times, but what is as incredibly evident that we already know that so much of the drivers of this are outside of our control. The Ofsted regime, ruthless accountability, funding, and all the other challenges that we come up against. But collectivise, unity, solidarity, those seem to be very much the key messages. I had the privilege of teaching at a school for 7 years. We had an excellent relationship with the head from NQT to 7 years from an NQT, and we went through various Ofsteds actually. And I remember one year there was a disappointment that we didn't get the outstanding, and I said to my head teacher, but we're in an outstandingly happy school, aren't we? And sometimes I think that's what matters. So take good care of each other, collectivise, solidarity and unity, and please do join get involved with the campaigns to value education, value educators, and let's build a collective fight back. So thank you very much.